Okay, well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to entertain such a small and insignificant publication such as mine.
We
But
all
it's,
start off that way, though, don't we?
I guess so. But honestly, it's such a big privilege and pleasure to be able to speak to you. So thank you.
Thanks very much for the invitation. Looking forward to it.
Not at all. Okay, cool. So I wanna start kind of at the beginning, I guess. I want to talk about your most, I guess, what we'd say is your most popular medium of film analysis, criticism, your internet video based medium.
Yeah.
How, why, and when did you start this venture?
Okay. It's a long story, so I'll try and give you a shorter version I can because I've talked about this many times before. Basically, I was making films myself. I was writing, producing, directing, editing short films, and I was working on other people's film projects as well. And that went on for quite a few years, really enjoyed it. And I'd also been working in mental health for many years. My dad worked in mental health, so I'd studied a lot of psychology in my life as well. And that started to blend in with the filmmaking. And I was doing a lot of stuff in my directing and in my scripts that I think a lot of film directors wouldn't do. And so I was thinking, oh, I'm one of the first to do this. And then I started studying the masters, you know, Hitchcock and Kubrick and Lynch and people like that, and studying their films in detail to find out how I could be a better director. And I gradually discovered that they were already doing the kind of things that I thought I was being very original in doing, but they had been doing it way better than I had. And I was so impressed with the things I was finding in the films that I thought, I've got to share this with the world. Yeah. So that was the beginning, and YouTube had just started up at the time, around about 2006. And I started a channel on there thinking maybe a few hundred filmmakers will be interested in this, and everyone else will just go, oh, you're a lunatic. You're just some obsessive compulsive nerd. But no, you know, a couple of months, 10,000 subscribers, and then it all just snowballed from there. Yeah.
Great. I was going to say you've amassed an impressive following of, I think it's about 250,000 subscribers to this day. And obviously your website Creative Learning is also very popular. Why do you think you in particular have attracted so much attention?
Well, actually, I don't think that, I mean, it's just been this last couple of weeks have passed the 250,000 mark on the channel. But actually, I mean, the channel's been running since, you know, 2007-ish. And when you look at some of the subscriber amounts that some other channels have got on YouTube, they've got way bigger subscriber amounts than I have. So I don't really consider it to be all that impressive, the numbers. It is limited by a number of factors, especially the fact that I'm exploring stuff in a very in-depth way, and that doesn't really lend itself to the clickbait, fast food video type thing that a lot of people follow. And I don't do the kind of thumbnail pictures where you've got an arrow pointing at something and a big emotional word and all that. I hate all that. But unfortunately, with the way YouTube works, it does seem like people are having to do things like that just to be noticed on YouTube. And I've done it from time to time myself to test it, and it does work. One part of it, I think, I don't think this is a major element, but it seems to be there from feedback I've had. Outside of Britain, I think a lot of people go, oh, this guy's British, and they automatically associate intelligence and being cultured and all that. But here in Britain, I'm a Scouser and I'm a scumbag. So, you know, so people outside of Britain tend to refer to my work as scholarly, which it's not because I'm not an academic. I guess it's got overlaps with that in the way that I do things. But I think probably because I got in there at the early stages of YouTube, when there was virtually nobody doing the kind of film study videos, there was just me and Red Letter Media. We started it off within a month of each other in 2007-ish. I always forget the exact dates. And they did the more comedic approach to things, and I did the more sort of scholarly approach. And I guess a lot of the stuff that I was talking about, people had never heard of before. It was very unusual. And I've always made a thing with my work right along that I do not want to be repeating other people's content. You know, so much of what's on YouTube is just people watching other people's videos, regurgitating it, doing a better thumbnail, a more catchy headline, and they get the views that way, but they've actually just borrowed a lot of their information from other people. And sometimes they credit them, and that's fine, you know, that's fine. Sometimes they do a better job of presentation. But the kinds of things I was talking about with these movies were things that people had never heard of before, so it was new to them. So I've always tried to keep that freshness with all of the videos as we've gone along. And it's definitely not the presentation in terms of the video editing that makes my stuff catch on, because, you know, other people do really fancy video editing, nice swipe effects with images moving back and forth, and all nicely condensed to appeal to the algorithm and stuff like that. My stuff is still really messy presentation wise, but it's the concepts that people like, it's the concepts that sell it. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, would you view yourself as the kind of middle ground between the kind of thumbnail, Instagrammy, YouTubey type of film criticism and the, I guess, traditional, in inverted commas, published journal type of criticism?
I don't think I do place myself like that, because, I mean, before I started publishing my stuff, I'm not aware that there was really anybody outside of academia who was trying to do serious film studies. So I don't feel like I fall in between them, because there's nothing on that side, you know. And nowadays there is, but I didn't come from that. I helped spawn that, you know. And there have been some sources online who've cited me as being one of the key sources, if not the key source, that triggered the whole trend of video film analysis essays. I don't really think of myself as laying on some spectrum there. I just perceive my own work for what it is independently, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, completely. So obviously, film analysis is something that's been going on for a very long time, and it's evolved massively, in good ways and bad, I guess. It's been made much more accessible and probably democratized as well. You know, it's available to so many more people now. Can you tell me what your views are of this change, of this evolution?
I think before I started doing film studies of my own, I didn't read any books on the subject or anything. I mean, film critique, as far as I knew, was basically like Barry Norman, you know, when he was doing his film reviews on TV and stuff. And I'd read a lot of biographies of filmmakers, you know, my favourite filmmakers, and these would be academically written biographies that would give all detailed sources and information and interviews with people who worked with the filmmakers. And I learned a lot through that. But most of my understanding of film basically ended up coming from making films myself. And I get a lot of people sending messages asking, how do you do this stuff, you know? And I never reveal all of my methods because there's so many competitors out there at the moment on YouTube. But I don't believe that a person can really seriously study film in a credible way, even if they're an academic, if they haven't had some experience of actually making movies themselves. I think it's so important. I would apply that to almost any field. You know, you can learn a lot from just reading the books, but actually getting involved in the work, very important.
Mm. We'll get onto Kubrick later, but there's definitely a Kubrick quote there where he says something like, "Best way to learn is to pick up a camera" or something. I think.
Yeah. I think there's quite a few quotes like that. Yeah. It probably sounds like I'm sort of dismissing academia, but I'm not. I've got a lot of academic books that I've read. I mean, if you look on the shelf here, that's one that I haven't read yet. That's an academic book on 2001: A Space Odyssey. I do read academic sources these days. I've got lots of them in the other room. There's academic authors who I highly respect. There's plenty of good comes out of the field, so I'm not dismissing academia. Yeah.
I was going to say that moves on quite nicely to the next question. I was going to ask, are there any could you give me some names of particular critics or commentators or analysts, perhaps, that have? And I know you're reluctant to talk at length about your mode of inquiry, but are there any that have shaped your mode of inquiry, I guess, and how you watch films?
There aren't really any film critics that I would go to for that. In my teens, there was a TV series that was on, I think on Friday evenings or something, that was presented by Alex Cox, who was a director from Liverpool. Do you know about him? Yeah.
I don't know, actually.
You don't know. He went over to Hollywood for a little while and he made a few movies. He did one called Repo Man with Emilio Estevez, which has got a bit of a cult following. So it's a good little movie, although the studio took it off him and re-edited it. Well, anyway, after he came back from Hollywood, he did a few things here. And one of them was a TV show. Each week he would take a classic cult movie and show it. And it would be stuff like Dirty Harry or The Terminator or Rumblefish, a bit more arty type stuff. And each week he would do, they would show the movie, but he would start off before the movie giving a breakdown about the production and some interpretations he would give as well. And I think he used to end after the film. He might have said a few words, I can't remember. But his little monologues, they were good. I enjoyed those. And there's another fellow called, I think his name is Robert McKee. He's quite well known, teaches people script writing. I think I've got his name right. I saw a TV series of his in my teens as well. Pretty sure he's an academic. And he was pointing things out in movies like The Terminator that were really interesting, like The Terminator when he fixes his eye up in the mirror and then he looks in the mirror, he's got the shades on and he fixes his hair. And it's like, why would a robot fix its hair? This creature has vanity. And I was watching things like that from him and I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is good, And then my dad also was heavily into psychology, so he would point things out in Hitchcock's movies that sort of clued me up on a few things. Yeah, but I don't think there was any specific film critics who made much of an impression on me. Instead, what I tended to do was read biographies of really good filmmakers. I read biographies on Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Kubrick, Hitchcock, and from those biographies I would be getting the quotes from the filmmakers themselves and the accounts of how they shot things. And sometimes there would be little descriptions of what things meant, even from the directors or the screenwriters might have said some things. But yeah, it was more the biographies of the filmmakers themselves that had an impression on me.
Okay. Do you read reviews before you see films in the cinema?
I try. I tend to just get the gist of whether the film is liked or not, or whether people are recommending it. I tend to listen more to friends who've seen the films because I do think that today's marketing involves a hell of a lot of false advertising online, and I do think that there are quite a few critics out there who in one way or another are sort of taking a backhander in order to give a positive review. And that sounds really nefarious, but sometimes that works in a more simple, well, not necessarily more simple way, but a more innocent way. For example, say some particular film review magazine, they have relationships with the film studios, and if they give a really scathing review of some movie, they might not get the exclusive interviews for the next movie that comes out from that studio. And that's true of reviewing across the board with a lot of things. There's often a fear to call something out when it's terrible, But whether I'm going to watch a movie or whether I'm doing a study on a movie, I don't tend to read detailed reviews in advance because I want to let the film have its own effect on me.
Yeah. Okay. And so the industry that you're a part of, I get the impression that it's, I guess the reasoning behind you being so reluctant to explain how you decode a film, is that because it's such a competitive market and you don't want people stealing your methods?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Who are your rivals? Who's doing this?
A hell of a lot of corporate funded channels have popped up on YouTube over the years, and they've got a lot more resources than me. Some of them have got dozens of regular writers that they work with, and they're putting out 4 or 5 very slickly edited videos a week. And they've got accompanying websites and all that kind of stuff, and they do the YouTube advertising thing, which gives an algorithm boost and stuff like that. So there's all that stuff, and I definitely know that a lot of those sources, they do take from other videos. I mean, I saw a video on John Carpenter's The Thing that was a very popular one, and it had a particular thumbnail picture, which, if I remember rightly, the picture had a caption that said "First Infected," and it was all about which character in the film was first infected by the alien bug. And some other corporate channel noticed that that particular video had got a huge amount of views, and they copied it, and they did a thumbnail picture that was almost identical, and they just basically copied that video across so that they could get views. And I did have a run-in with one particular channel called Screen Prism. One of their writers just basically lifted their entire study of The Shining from my online article. Pretty much everything in it was taken from my thing, and I had a complaint with them, and they took the video down, and the writer was blaming the producers were blaming the writer and stuff, and so I know that that stuff goes on. Yeah, so that's pretty much the reason why I don't give out a detailed account of how I do this stuff.
Okay, cool. Most of your analysis focuses on the genres of science fiction and horror. I'd say, I think that's probably fair to say.
Yeah,
Or a good chunk. What is it about that in particular that's appealed to you or attracted you?
I don't specifically seek out science fiction and horror, but it does turn out that way. It's probably because science fiction and horror seem to be two particular genres that, because they're surreal and they're allowed to bend reality a lot more than straight drama, you get a lot more interesting symbolism, especially visual symbolism, that goes into those genres. You also get it with kids' films as well. And I have done studies on like The Wizard of Oz and 1 or 2 other kids' films, but I've never really gotten much into that. But also, science fiction and horror especially, they allow an exploration of the dark aspects of human nature, which as a collective we tend to be in sort of denial of. And people like to explore the darkest, most terrifying aspects of life in a safe fiction form, you know. And horror allows to do that. You know, you can take a real life horrific thing like a Holocaust or a serial killer case, and you can present it in a horror fiction story as being some supernatural monster. So yeah, I definitely think that the safe exploration of the darkness is a major thing in horror. I think that applies with science fiction as well, because the two often overlap, don't they, science fiction and horror? Because science fiction provides a sort of artificial, logical basis for why the monster exists, you know.
So, okay, so your admiration of Kubrick is, I think, quite well known to your audience and your watchers. Not least through your article on him, Lessons from Stanley, which I really enjoyed reading.
Oh, you read that one, yeah?
Yeah, no, it was really intriguing. Actually.
I really enjoyed writing that one. Actually, I learned a lot in the process of writing it. It's like, oh, I have to use these techniques myself.
Can you summarize his appeal to you? I guess, yeah.
I don't know where his incredible intellect came from. It's bizarre. I mean, I've read the biographies of his life, and you know, obviously he was gifted with a very high intellect, but he didn't achieve academically when he was younger. In fact, he never really went into academia. I think if I remember rightly, he breezed into college at one point, and then breezed back out, and he ended up doing the photography for Look magazine. And he basically became self-educated. You know, you've read that document I wrote on it. There's tons of evidence that he was pretty much obsessed with self-education, and he did it that way. I think there's some aspects that may have come from other things. His ability to manipulate is one that I find very interesting. I mean, it scares me to think what damage he could have done in the world if he was a bad person with the intellect that he had. And you read the accounts on the productions and how hardly anybody had much of a clue of what he was really up to. Co-writers, again and again, they've reported that he kept them in the dark about things. Very manipulative, and I don't morally disagree with all of the approaches that he took, but I'm fascinated in his ability to do it and why he did it. I think it was just a secrecy thing. I just think he wanted to do his own thing, express his own thing in his movies, and not have to answer to anybody, not even his collaborators. And so this very carefully crafted secrecy was his way of doing that. If nobody knew what he was doing, they couldn't challenge it. And when he worked on Spartacus, I think that was a big one. From the biographies I've read, he came onto Spartacus because he'd already worked with Kirk Douglas on Paths of Glory, the war film. And it wasn't a huge hit, but the film did gain a lot of respect for Kubrick within the film industry itself. It did him a lot of favours in that way. And so when Spartacus was being made, it was Kirk Douglas with his star power who called on Kubrick and said, let's get this guy in, this young director, he's great. And so Kubrick just jumped in there in charge of a huge multi-million production. And he jumped the queue ahead of all of these other crew members who for years had been trying to work their way up the ladder. And Kubrick got a lot of stick off the Spartacus crew, really nasty. They were incredibly jealous that he'd had this opportunity, but he'd earned it. And I think, from what I was reading, I got the impression that he learned about competition and jealousy with the cast and crew, and he learned how to deal with it when he was on the shoot of that film. And apparently he kept incredibly calm no matter what nastiness was thrown at him by the cast and crew. And well, he was quite jolly about it, according to the reports I read. So I think that was a big sort of experience that made him think even more like a chess player. Almost like he took the attitude, okay, if all these people around me are competitors who want to manipulate me in this way or that way, I'll do it back to them, and I'll do it much, much smarter. Yeah, I think he had a lack of trust for collaborators, probably enhanced by Spartacus.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I think is incredible about him is that he really, he mastered pretty much every genre there is, whether it's war, period drama, horror, science fiction. Yeah, which I think is incredible and something that actually pretty much no director has actually managed to do. The fact that he was
Very few. I'll just add one there though. Francis Ford Coppola.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's got quite a variety in there, but yeah.
Is he the living Kubrick?
I wouldn't say he's the living Kubrick, but he has got probably as diverse filmography. I mean, Apocalypse Now, War. He did the Dracula horror. What was his version called? It might have just been called Dracula. He did Rumblefish, which was like street gangs and music. He did The Conversation, which was like spy thriller. He's done quite a wide variety of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, it's very, very rare. Yeah.
But his ability to just completely almost blink a vision, invest himself completely. I mean, I went to the Kubrick archives when it was in the Design Museum in London, which I just thought was an incredible experience. And to see
one of the few people I've ever talked to who's actually been to look at the Kubrick archive stuff. Well done.
it was fun. Just to see the chest of drawers of all of his. I think it was for Napoleon, which obviously never came out, which was a shame. But I just think that's a crazy feat to pull off, to be able to focus so single-mindedly on something. You obviously, you're obviously very well read, and you read a lot of biographies and things. Do you also find that you can sort of blinker vision when you're doing a film analysis, and just completely lock into that one thing?
Yeah, yeah. When I decide I want into something and I've got enthusiasm for it, I just really get focused. And I guess I've kind of got a little bit of an obsessive compulsive thing at times, similar to what Kubrick had. I don't think it's anywhere near the degree he had, the detail he did. I'm not like that with general life. I mean, I get a lot of people asking me, can't you just sit and watch a movie and enjoy it? And oh yeah, definitely. You know, there's tons of movies that I love that I don't see this kind of depth in that I do with the film reviews. But I don't do reviews of those movies because what's the point, you know? There's a lot of really immature movies that I love. I really enjoy the Rambo films. I mean, actually, First Blood is excellent on a lot of levels, on all levels actually. But like Rambo, the second one, intellectually, it's ridiculous. But I find the movie so enjoyable just to casually watch, you know, popcorn munching type of movie. But yeah, when I decide that I want to study a particular thing, that's when I suddenly go into voluntary, obsessive, compulsive thing, and I was like, right, I'm going to gather all the information on this. I'm going to cross-reference everything. Yeah.
I want to talk about your the psychology of films. Obviously, Kubrick was clearly very very familiar with you know, the psychologies of, I don't know, Freud and Jung and all of these key figures of the mainly 20th century. And obviously, a lot of these psychologies are represented in a lot of his filmography. Can you expand on the psychological role of films in our culture?
Yeah, well, we already did touch upon that a little bit earlier when I was talking about how fiction, science fiction, horror especially, are used to explore the dark, unconscious. I do think that people have this thing where they like to learn about the world in a casual, enjoyable way that is not restricted to words. I mean, you know, reading a published study can be fantastic. You know, it can be absolutely mind-blowing, and I've learned so much from that format. But people like to experience something on a non-verbal level where there's a different type of learning, and that's what, you know, fiction stories are all about, because they're all allegories. Whether you're reading a novel or watching a movie, or whether it's a kid listening to some bedtime story, we know it's fake. We know it didn't really happen. We know that the actor's expression is not their real feelings at the time, that they're just pretending. So why the hell do we look at what we know is completely, utterly fake? It's because it's allegorical. It's important to us because it relates to our lives. And we learn about our lives by looking at what people are going through in these movies. It gives us a different way of considering our own personal life. And that reconsideration of our own life goes beyond verbal description, and it gets down to core feelings and unconscious processes and stuff like that. That's why I think cinema is so incredibly powerful for people. I mean, do you ever meet anybody who says, oh, I don't watch movies ever? You know, hardly. I mean, everyone engages with them at some point to different degrees, and they know it's fake. They watch it because they know that unconsciously it relates to their own life, and I think they watch it with the hope of learning some little nuggets of insight about themselves, about the people around them, and about the world that they live in. And I mean, Kubrick's movies were very educational about this. You watch Dr. Strangelove, you learn all about the Cold War, how it works, and in that respect, Dr. Strangelove, it's as good as an academic book. It's just communicating in a different format, you know. And all of his movies, I mean, you know, you said that he jumped across different genres, and I think one of the reasons he did jump across different genres is because each film is like a chunk of education within that genre. You know, you want to learn about fear, you watch The Shining. You want to learn about conspiracy theories, you watch Eyes Wide Shut. You want to learn about the criminal mindset, you watch Clockwork Orange. You know, they're all educational pieces. I actually consider them to be, you know, the equivalent of published academic studies on human nature.
Okay, interesting. Going back to Kubrick, obviously you've spoken about how he was, I guess some would say, an enigma or very mysterious. Kept his cards very close to his chest. Do you think there's a danger of over speculating or sensationalizing him in a way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I remember I had a conversation with an ex-partner of mine who I was with for 9 years. She was with me in the early stages when I was doing a lot of this film studies stuff. And she was very, very technically academic. She wasn't so much interested in anything to do with the unconscious. Like, she wouldn't discuss her dreams with me or anything like that, you know. But she did say to me once, you know, don't you see any flaws in Stanley Kubrick? And I was like, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've read from one or two accounts in the biographies and people who worked with him that he was uncomfortable with hugs. You know, just giving someone a hug, you know. And like I said, I disagree with a lot of the very manipulative mind games. I think some of the collaborators he worked with were really nice people who didn't deserve that. And I personally would not feel comfortable with taking that level of manipulation with people. So those are flaws that I see. Another one, and I remember specifically bringing this up to my partner at the time in response to her question, is that, you know, when he was making Eyes Wide Shut, his own daughter ran off with the Scientology cult. And it's like, hang on, this is Kubrick, the family man. He didn't see that coming. He didn't prevent it. What the hell happened there, you know? So things like that make me view him as being, yeah, sure, he was, I do think of him as being a genius in the intellectual sense, but I think he had flaws just like anybody else, and he had smoking habits and stuff like that. I don't think he ate very healthy. You see him in the final years of his life, he often looked quite overweight. Don't think he was looking after himself there. I mean, I'm 51 now, and I am so careful with diet. I don't touch alcohol anymore, hardly ever. It's not a rule, but I just don't really want to touch it anymore. I don't smoke, I don't do any drugs, and I'm in pretty good health because of that. So I look at Kubrick with being the overweight and smoking and stuff, and I'm thinking, what are you doing there? You know?
Yeah. Um, yeah, perhaps not as clever as we might think he is. But okay, interesting. I want to move on to what you think the future holds for the medium of filmmaking. I mean, I know you've expressed uh, slight despair, maybe for the future, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I'll try. I think if there's any thoughts on it that I haven't really said before. I mean, I know I did a huge video on it, 26 reasons why modern movies are so awful or something like that, and that's done pretty well. That video, it's like 500,000 views on that one. The comment section is full of people who are like, yes, that's true, you know.
Or maybe what's gone wrong? What's gone wrong? Maybe start there.
Well, well, for one thing, the whole film industry has become way too political, both in the way the organisations are structured and how the creative decisions are made, and the forced political content of the movies. There's too much political messaging going on, and a lot of it is just based on party politics. When I was younger, hardly anybody discussed party politics. That was something that was discussed on TV and the newspapers. If you went down to your local pub, hardly anybody talked about politics. Even if they talked about movies, they'd just be talking about, that's a great movie, I like that character, stuff like that. And nowadays, it's almost like every bloody movie has to have political messages in it. And even if you agree with the political messages, it's boring. Because it's the same messages over and over again. It's not even original, the message. I wouldn't mind if the messages were original, but like, politics has seeped so heavily into everything in our culture these days. It's almost like everybody is trying to manipulate how you vote at the next election. And that is just beyond boring to me. I'm so sick of it. And this is one of the reasons why I virtually never post political videos. I don't get involved in party politics. I don't I don't go out and tell people why you should or shouldn't vote for Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn or Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I don't get involved in all that. I follow the stuff myself and I've got my own opinions on it. But it's nice to have a space where you can just get away from all that, because there's so much more to life. So I want my work to be completely separate from that. And a good thing about it is it means I can chat to anybody, I can make videos for anybody. Because if you start trying to throw in your own political messages, half your audience go, well, I disagree with that, so I'm not going to watch your stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a major thing that's been ruining movies for a long time. I would say movies cannot get better until that goes. We need to stop having all of these actors and producers who are trying to manipulate us into supporting whatever political candidate they support. That has got to go. I think the overuse of CGI, and as is coming in now, we've got the use of artificial intelligence to create videos, which to me is just utterly lame. I mean, it's impressive in a technical sense that they can do that, and I've seen some really good YouTube videos that were apparently created by AI systems being fed verbal input from some user, and then the AI program generates a video from that. I don't know how accurate that is, because I do know that the AI community collectively has been pushing a lot of exaggeration of their own products for a long time. I've made videos on this subject before. But yeah, the increasing use of AI and CGI in movies has been getting movies away from reality. I want to see more movies about flesh and blood people in front of a camera in an actual room. And I don't think I'm the only one in this. I mean, you know, you go on YouTube and you look at all the biggest podcasters, and they're just flesh and blood people sat in front of a camera with a real background behind them most of the time. You watch Joe Rogan, things like that. And it's very organic and natural, and people love that. So that shows that there is a huge desire to have that back. But another part of it is that I think a lot of this the technical stuff in the film industry is specifically designed to keep out small competitors. So it's like your movie has to have ultra clean, pristine cinematography, and every camera movement has to be super smooth with not the slightest jitter in the camera. But a lot of my favourite movies completely go against that. I love Kevin Smith's Clerks. Have you ever seen that one?
I've not, no.
It's shot on 16mm black and white, terrible lighting, and it's a huge cult film with a massive following. You'd love it. And the guy shot it in he was working in a convenience store in America, and he shot the film at night in the store, just using his friends as actors and stuff like that. And it's so much better than almost everything that comes out of Hollywood. And a lot of people still love things like Laurel and Hardy or the Marx Brothers, where technically it looks absolutely awful compared to what we got today, but the characters, the stories and everything are great. So I do think the film industry keeps having these expensive technical standards so that all of the smaller filmmaking companies can't afford to keep up with them, and the distributors are like, oh, we're not going to release that because it doesn't look like a shampoo advert. Yeah.
Are there any recent releases that have impressed you?
Yeah. I'm quite surprised this last year. Horror has been very good. I very much enjoyed The Substance. That was wild. You seen it yet?
Yeah, crazy.
Insane. Yeah, loved it. Very expressive. A bit over the top in places, but damn good. And good to see. I think most of the special effects in that were in camera, you know, not CGI. Yeah, so that was fantastic. Some other good horror films. An Irish director did one called Oddity. That was really good. I enjoyed Late Night with the Devil as well. So that's 3 from last year that I thought were very, very good.
Yeah. The only thing about The Substance that I found a little bit tiring was just how referential it was to so many other horror films. I couldn't help myself but kind of count in my head how many different other horror films. I mean, the amount of sort of Shining references and all that kind of, a lot of red bathrooms and red corridors and blood and water. Which, but no, I thought the story was good. Yeah.
That seems to have become a marketing trick with movies now, is to throw in what they call Easter eggs, so then people can make YouTube videos about the Easter eggs they've discovered. And it's funny. That's like it's kind of like they're putting. It's ironic. It used to be like Kubrick and Hitchcock and people like that would put all this subliminal stuff in with a purpose of affecting the unconscious. And now it's being done for the sake of marketing, just so that people on YouTube will talk about the movie. It's funny. Yeah. The film was a bit long and repetitive, wasn't it? I thought they could have chopped it down by about 20 minutes.
Yeah. No, I see that. Have you ever on subliminals and stuff? Obviously, are there films that you've not enjoyed but have been very, very subliminally rich? So, yeah.
I did a video many years ago. I could do with doing a HD update on this one, actually. There was a movie by Gus Van Sant who directed Good Will Hunting. Good director. He did this little movie called Elephant, which was about the Columbine massacre. Have you seen it? Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Have you seen the video I did on it? I don't think it's on YouTube.
I haven't actually. No.
Well, basically, the Elephant film, it was okay to watch. It wasn't incredibly entertaining, but it was kind of engaging. But he did this thing in that movie, subliminally, which I thought the way he did it was very impressive, but I completely disagreed with the message of it. Was that characters would be walking around the school and there would be these long shots with the camera following them for it'd be like 3-minute shot, just the camera hovering behind them, following them as they go. Mm-hmm. And the same with cars. You see cars going down the road in the movie and the camera's following it from behind. And he talked about this in interviews, so I know it's not my imagination. He said that he was really concerned about the video games affecting the Columbine killers, because it was the news media had reported they played the Doom games, the first-person shooter games. Mm-hmm. And so he shot the film in the kind of camera angles that you get in those video games. So GTA 5, GTA 5 wasn't out then, but things like Grand Theft Auto games like that, where you're getting in cars, driving around, killing people and stuff. So he would have the camera following the characters in the film from the same angles that they do in video games. And he dropped lots of other hints in the movie there about video games as well. And the film did explore some of the other possible explanations, but the primary visual thing that was done in the movie was video games made them do this, which is not true. I've written articles and videos on this before. The video games don't make people go and commit crimes. I won't go into it here because there's a lot of details about it, but yeah, I was very impressed with the way he did that in the film.
Because it's I think it's probably, obviously subliminal messaging is I don't know, I guess characterizes vast quantities of the content you produce and investigating that, but I think, do you agree that it can get to a point where there's so much is so heavy with subliminal messaging that it almost feels self-aware, and it's a kind of act of, look what I'm doing. It's kind of like it's relying on subliminals to increase the quality of the film. Yeah.
I'm totally guilty of it myself, because I've only made one feature film. It was 82 minutes long, I think, called Turn in Your Grave. It was a horror, and I absolutely overdid the self-conscious subliminal thing in it. And I did have people telling me that. People were saying, this is absolutely mashing my brain. You haven't given me a surface narrative that I can latch onto. My head is cabbaged by this movie. And some people really liked it, and other people like, no, that's too frustrating, And I've had that experience myself with certain movies. David Lynch's Inland Empire has got some really powerful moments in it, but it's so long and it's so packed with subliminal messaging. Even I can't be bothered. I'm like, oh, gosh, I'm not going to sit down and spend 4 months studying this film to try and figure it out. It's too much. So yeah, it can be overdone sometimes. I do think that there's, I mean, I like that David Lynch made these movies where he doesn't give you an easy surface level explanation. It's like he's saying to you, look, you've got to figure this out. You know, this is all subliminal, it's all dream logic, and you're going to have to figure it out. And it's like he's grabbing you and dragging you into that realm. Some people kick and scream and get out of it, and some people go, oh, go on, okay. And I do think that can be good for opening people up. I think I have the most respect for when filmmakers are able to create a movie that's got a nice, easy surface narrative that you can casually enjoy, but if you want, you can delve deeper and find all this other stuff. That's quite a difficult thing to do. Kubrick's not the only one who's done it, others have done it, but that's when it impresses me the most. Yeah.
And how do you know when you're seeing things that aren't actually there or that the director didn't intend? And is there a problem with seeing more than was intended to see?
Definitely there's sometimes where I see things that I'm pretty sure were not intended. But sometimes they have relevance anyway. Like with the Exorcist, the thing about the child abuse theme, I do not believe at all that the writer or director intended that to be in the film as a sexual abuse theme. And I was confused by it for years because I was like, I can't find any evidence that they intended it. And yet all of these details are there in the film that suggest it, what's going on. And so I started reading about the history of reported possession cases, and it turns out that most of them occur around puberty. Most of them occur within strict religious family contexts. And some of them, there were reports of possible sexual abuse. And so with studying all of that, I came to the conclusion, I'm not 100% about this, but I think it's a very good hypothesis. I came to the conclusion that a lot of these so-called possession cases, the real ones that William Peter Blatty was studying when he wrote The Exorcist, that they were actually issues to do with sexuality. The kids would reach puberty, and then their sexual behaviour would be misperceived as being like some demonic possession thing, you know? Particularly the areas around masturbation, you know? Yeah. This is something which society doesn't talk about much, and this is another example of how a horror movie can explore something that we all shy away from. Kids reach puberty, sexual awareness and sexual activity in form of masturbation starts to kick in, and the parents get really uncomfortable with it and don't know how to handle it. This is very common. And it can be so bad that the parental response of suppression of the child's sexual development can lead to abnormal sexual behaviour later on. And I think that in these religious contexts, the sexual behaviour is perceived as demonic. And you know, if you look at religious art, representations of hell and the occult and stuff like that, there's usually elements of sexual perversion. And if you read occult literature, they talk about religion, the Christianity, as being a suppressor of the natural sexual urge. So you've got this sexual conflict between the occult and religion. And I think because William Peter Blatty was basing his film on all of that material, I think the sexual connotations got ported over without him realising it. Yeah. It took me a long time to figure that one out about The Exorcist. In terms of seeing things in films that aren't there, basically, I mean, I will reveal part of my, you've tricked me into it, I'll reveal part of my process. When I start getting ideas that I think, oh, there seems to be a bit of this going on in this movie, possible theme of that, one of the things that I do is I put on my own critical cap and I say, well, let's take the position of the person who is going to disagree with this. And I will seek out all the arguments against my own theory. And in doing that, I often end up demolishing my own theories but before I have a chance to even write about them. And the ones that you see in the videos and the articles are the ones that survived that process. And so often, the stuff that I do publish, I will often include arguments against it and my assessment of those arguments or counter-arguments against it. So there's very much an awareness throughout my whole process that I could be wrong about this. I do get it wrong sometimes. Sometimes things don't mean what I think they do and they're coincidental, and I seek that out. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Well, not that it's a particularly pleasant topic to talk about, but the on the theme of of revealing the child sexual abuse. I mean, you also bring it up in The Shining, I think, which was actually a fascinating video. Also, using the vehicle of horror to communicate these messages. I just want to say that was, I thought that was, and I know that's one of your most successful videos, I think, on your channel.
Yeah. On the main channel, it's the most watched video on my main channel. Well, I have got one on another channel that's got more views. Yeah. But yeah, I was very pleased with that. That's some of the best work I've ever done, and I've had a lot of people arguing against it over the years, trying to argue against it. But it's quite hard to do when you start looking at all the details in the film, and especially when you look at Kubrick's filmography and the sexual themes that were there from Lolita, Clockwork Orange, Eyes Wide Shut. It's clear that the guy had a bit of a preoccupation with the dark side of human sexuality. Yeah,
absolutely. No, that's very true. I want to get into we've touched on it briefly, but I want to get onto the Dan Leberg criticism that you faced. I know there's not it's the most, I guess it's the most formal attack on you and your kind of mode, I guess. I mean, you say on your own website that it would be a mistake to put you on an intellectual pedestal, and I think what he thinks is that you are, in fact, trying to put yourself on a kind of academic intellectual pedestal. The fact that you say that it would be a mistake to put you on an intellectual pedestal, are you kind of trying to move away from the traditionally academic or scholarly modes of criticism?
Yeah, I probably am. Like I said earlier, I read a lot of academic books. I respect some of my favourite intellectuals of all time are academics. Incredible respect for some of the work that they've done. At the same time, there are pitfalls in academia. I mean, I never went into academia partially because I grew up in poverty-stricken parts of Liverpool that were incredibly rough, and I never knew anybody who was involved in college or university. So I was kind of, for me, that was off the cards. The British class system is pretty strict. It still is. I mean, that doesn't stop me these days. I could go back and go into academia. But as I read lots and lots of academic books, as I was self-educating later on, I think I sort of had a distrust of it, similar to the kind of criticism that Kubrick threw at it. And this is one of the reasons I related to Kubrick, is because he became incredibly knowledgeable outside of academia by reading the same books that they read, and he would arguably read even more than they would. But there's also a lot of snobbishness associated with academia that I don't like. There's the academics who are genuine in their pursuit of knowledge, and there's the academics who just want the title of being an academic so that they can claim intellectual superiority over others. I don't know what the exact ratio would be of the two types within academia. I tend to think of it as being 50-50. And I consider Dan Leberg to be one of those latter people who just wants the title. When you mentioned in your email about it, I was thinking, well, who's he referring to? And the only one I could think of was Dan Leberg. So I went and dug out. I've got some really good info on this. This is stuff that I've not talked about because I never published any response to Dan Leberg previously. And I have been writing my own first book on film analysis. And I've been considering putting a section in there about Dan Leberg's article. So I've made a few notes here. But the first thing is I've actually got, this is the email correspondence between Dan Leberg and I, because when he sent me this, it all sounded very, very nice and sincere, you know.
Yeah.
And I'll just read a little bit of it out.
Yeah, please.
I can read out. How are we fixed for time, by the way?
I'm good for time. If you
right, okay, I'll read out his whole email to you. So, hi Rob, my name is Dan Leberg. I am a master's candidate at the University of Toronto's Cinema Studies Institute. I am currently working on a paper that compares academic analysis of Kubrick's 2001 and popular and non-academic analysis. And I have a question about how you conducted your research for your treatment of this film. Yeah, I'll jump ahead here because there's an important bit that I wanted to read out that I think is quite important. Yeah. Sorry, the in-between bit. He says that he's asking. He's not accusing me. He's asking me whether I plagiarised an academic called Jared Loughlin. Apparently, he wrote a book called Alien, Sex, the Body and Desire in Cinema and Theology. And apparently, he had a chapter in the book which identified the parallel between the monolith in 2001 and the cinema screen in the movie. And he outlined that, and it's a good, valid question. You know, I invite these kinds of questions, that's fine. So he outlines that, and then he says, I'm not accusing you of plagiarism or copyright infringement. I'm simply curious as to your methodology and the genesis of your theories. So it's all very nice, and he's outright saying he doesn't accuse me of plagiarism, and yet his published article does. So, and I gave him a very detailed response here, and I won't read the entire thing out because it's a drag, but I'll read out some key points because he ignored all of this when he published his article. Okay. So, yeah, actually this first one is very important because there was one other person who had made a similar allegation of plagiarism against me, claiming that they were the one who were the first to publish about it. So I'll read this out. I'm not an academic, nor do I wish to be, but if I'm not mistaken, isn't the concept of crediting another author supposed to be based upon the notion of the second author having read the first author's work? With something as subjective as film analysis, it's quite easy for several authors at different points to make similar observations independently, which is what happened. For example, a fellow called Jay Widener wrote me about 2 years ago. My video on YouTube about the monolith as screen is from 2007. Yeah, I published my monolith screen interpretation 2007. But the expanded text analysis came later. Jay claimed that he'd written an article in the year 2001 and posted it on his website, jwidener.com, containing a paragraph comparing the monolith with the cinema screen. Unfortunately, Widener is unable to entertain the idea that someone other than himself would be able to notice the cinema screen relationship with the monolith. He sent me several very nasty emails, despite my detailed explanation of how I stumbled across the same metaphor. Jay spent weeks posting anonymous claims of plagiarism on the comments sections of my 2001 videos. I caught him using multiple YouTube accounts set up on the same day to try and fashion an artificial consensus of YouTube users. I also found that depending on which website analysis tool you use, Jay's website had only been registered from either October 2002 or from 2004. A quick glance through the content of his website also shows a very different writing and thinking style to mine. I'm almost done here with this quote, but it's quite important.
Yeah.
Regardless of Widener's character and attitudes to other film reviewers, if his article really was posted back around 2001, then using the same logic by which you suggest I should be crediting Loughlin both Loughlin and I should be crediting Jay Widener. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I've got two different sources making a plagiarism accusation there. And I've always said, with my studies on 2001, well, for one thing, I've never said that I was the only person who had made this discovery. I've always said that I suspect that some people, since the movie came out, even before I was born, have probably discovered that themselves in watching the movie and gone, oh yeah, I get it, yeah, and then they've walked away and that's it. There may have been thousands of those people, but I just happened to be the first one who did an in-depth video about it that not only identified the link, but actually expanded it in terms of explaining the overall meanings of the movie. If I remember rightly, Jay Widener's one passed it off as a Kubrick joke and nothing more. But I was the one who was saying, if the monolith is the cinema screen, then that makes us the apes. And the movie is teaching us in the same way that the monolith teaches the apes. And I expanded that as being the whole movie was being kind of about that. I'm not aware that either of those other sources that I identified that or any of the other stuff that I had. So yeah, that was the part of the response that I gave to Dan Leberg. And when he published his article, he never mentioned that, you know. You'd think he would have. Why didn't he publish an article saying both Rob Ager and Jay Widener have ripped off this Jared Loughlin? The reason he didn't bother attacking Jay Widener is because Widener's work had not caught on. And so I went on to point out various other things. I know that, I won't read it all out, but I know that one of them was that I'd mentioned to him about the fact that Kubrick himself was not an academic and yet he'd made these amazing movies. And how can you say that only an academic can do a serious study of a movie that was made by a non-academic? You know, so there was various other things like that that I put in my response, and he left all of that out when he published his article. And his article was quite nasty. He keeps referring to me as a fanboy, but as far as I know, I'm probably older than him. I was over 30 when he published his article. He swears in his article, he calls it the bastardization of something. I thought, oh my God, you idiot. It was so stupid that I didn't even bother publishing a response because I thought anyone reading this is going to see it for the ridiculousness that it is, you know.
Did it do anything for your reputation?
No, it didn't do
against you.
Actually, you know what? I did find something else that was because when I was hunting that down, I had a folder full of old responses and stuff, and I came across this, and this was from what's her name? Dahlia Schweitzer. Now I don't know if she still is, but she was at the time. She taught a course. She sent me this email here. She taught a course in visual language and culture in Los Angeles, right? And she'd specifically asked me, like a year before, I think, can I show your film analysis videos to my class? And she wasn't the only one. I'd had quite a few film class teachers or, you know, cultural film studies teachers who'd got in touch and said, enjoy your work, can I show it to the class? And I was always like, absolutely, I don't ask for any payment or nothing like that. Feel free, you're doing me a favour by showing my stuff to your classes. And they would be very enthusiastic. Well, she read Dan Leberg's article, and she was more annoyed than I was. And what she did, this is so funny, she sent me a batch of thank you letters from her own students who'd watched the stuff in her class. You know, this is the letters from them all. I think there's about 15 or something in there. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so that in itself was very reassuring. And then I had an email shortly after that from a Trevor Snell at Ohio University, who was running a Kubrick study course as part of his, he was doing his, he had a proposed undergraduate Kubrick class. And he says, the class got accepted, and I recently purchased your Kubrick DVDs, and I would like to use them for the class. You know, it's like, so I mean, you know, there's within academia, like I say, there's different attitudes, and I've had PhD level academics, not just in film studies, but in other areas as well, who've got in touch, who've been like, wow, love what you're doing, thanks very much, you know. So, you know, it's from Dan Leberg's article, it seems that I think he actually gave this account himself, that basically his own students were not taking his assessment of the film seriously, and they were saying, no, we've been and watched this Rob guy's stuff, and he was pissed off about that. Yeah, so there you go.
That's funny. Okay. I guess, do you, also another of his arguments is that people like you aren't under enough peer review scrutiny when you're doing your videos. You've got so much freedom that, you know, you have the opportunity to release anything, I guess.
Publish any old garbage. Yeah. Well,
that's basically
that is probably one of the very few points of his that I would say, yeah, okay, that's true. But I don't need to go and sign up and become an academic in order to counter that. There are lots and lots of people publishing all kinds of stuff out there, and I've actually taken a similar position to Dan Leberg, in the respect that there have been some published, well, I should say, online rumours about Kubrick's work and theories about his work that I've gone out of my way to debunk. I don't think The Shining is about the moon landing. I did a detailed video on that. I recently did the ones about the theories that Kubrick was assassinated, which I'm pretty damn sure he wasn't, and I've done 2 videos on that, and the second one gave 29 reasons why he wasn't. So yeah, I'm aware that there's stupid stuff floating around out there, but the answer isn't to say that only certified academics should be allowed to publish about these movies. I consider public opinion to be peer review. If I publish something that's stupid and rubbish, I get peer reviewed in the comment sections. And you know, if I do get people in the comment sections pointing out things that I've got wrong, and sometimes they get it right, and I'm like, oh, okay, thanks very much. And I'll even leave a pinned comment highlighting the points that they've brought up, saying, oh, there's a correction to be made in the video and so on. At the same time, I've had a lot of media reviews of my work over the years. Various popular media outlets, including some newspapers like the Irish Times, they did quite a few articles on my work over the years, and you could consider those to be peer review. I would say 95% of those bits of media coverage of my work, or sometimes it's happened from academics as well, 95% of it at least I'd say has been very positive. Actually, I've got another one here, which is got this book called American Cosmic. This is by Diana Pasulka. She's an academic, really good one as well. So she's talking about the psychology of UFOs and technology in relation to religion. She and I had a really good email exchange. She was asking about 2001. So I was chatting with her about my take that religious interpretations of human life have been sort of destroyed by the academic science view that we are just biological accidents, we are just walking meat sacks, and that there's nothing more to us. Now, I'm not religious, I don't buy into any religious doctrine, but I don't agree with that materialism only thing. I think there's more to the universe than just what we observe with microscopes and stuff, you know. And so I was chatting with her about that, and I was saying that there's a gap in how we humans view ourselves. That gap has been left by the destruction of these religious interpretations, and one of the things that's come along to fill that hole is the massive enthusiasm for UFOs. And it's like UFOs have replaced angels and demons. And a lot of the people who are really into the UFO thing, they've got these high hopes that friendly aliens are going to come to us and help us evolve and help us achieve immortality, which is something that religion always offered as a promise, you know. Yeah. So I had a really good chat with her about that, and then she ended up referencing it in the book. She's got 1 or 2 pages in the book that talk about our conversation. She's very positive about it. She's academic, you know. So there you go.
So okay, no, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I hadn't realised that you'd had so much uh, coverage in the academic world with lecturers and students. And,
Well,
okay,
on the
that's
website,
interesting.
there's a press page on the website that's got like a ton of links going back right to near the start of when I started publishing.
Okay.
I think there's something like 100 links, and some of them are to academic sources that who've referenced my work, and it includes the negative ones as well. Yeah.
Okay, I've got. I was gonna ask. You've got your sort of about me page, I guess, on Collative Learning website. It's about 5,000 words of kind of explanatory information, detailing your experience, your qualifications, your history, and your vision. I guess are the main things. Much of which seems what's the right word? Not. I guess defensive. Maybe. Do you feel the need to kind of account for yourself in this way? You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I totally agree there. There is a defensive aspect to it, because I did find out very early on when I was posting the videos that there would be people who would come along and would try to utterly discredit what I was putting out there. And it's not just academics. I mean, I get general members of the public doing the same as well. You know, in the comment sections, they'd start having a go. And sometimes they could be very, very nasty about it as well. Very personally nasty. You know, they'd be criticising, like if they were English, they'd be criticising the fact that I'm a Scouser, you know, which is stupid. I mean, you know, you go to parts of Britain and there's people who are, oh, Scousers are just thick thieves, you know, which there is some truth to at times. You know, I'm from Liverpool and we do have some terrible crime things going on here. And there are people in this city who take pride in being non-intellectual, you know. It's like to be an ape is to be real, to be an intellectual is to be false. That's kind of like the ideology of some people. But yeah, I get people attacking, saying it's like some people, they criticise like the clothes you wear or the fact that I have shabby hair. I don't get a proper fucking haircut and I don't care. Some of it's really ridiculous, and so I found that out very early on, and so I sort of set up the About page so that it would answer a lot of those questions, so that I wouldn't have to keep answering them over and over and over again over the years. And you know, a lot of the time I could just say, go to the About page, a lot of your questions are answered there. If you've got any more questions, come back. You know. But I mean, that defensiveness on my part was already there throughout my life before I published anything. Because I'm from the streets of Liverpool, and this is a rough city, not just physically but psychologically. And I mean, I always find it funny that like people online think they can intimidate with, you know, making nasty comments, and I'm like, that is nothing compared to the verbal attacks that people on the streets of Liverpool can give if you get into an argument with them. I mean, I knew 12-year-old kids who could destroy anybody's ego in like 3 minutes just with an onslaught of verbal insults. And I grew up with those kids, and I became a bit like that myself at the time. I was pretty good at tearing people's ego apart as well. So, you know, coming from that background, you learn to develop, part of it is you develop a thick skin, but you also learn a lot of defensive tactics, and you learn to expect hostility. I still have a problem in life of expecting hostility where there isn't going to be any because of the background that I come from. And I have to keep reminding myself, no, these people are okay. They're not nearly as nasty as those ones from the past. It's like those people from the past are still archetypes that still haunt me a little bit, you know? So yeah, that I think would explain some of the defensive aspects on the website page there.
Okay. I think that is about all I wanted to ask. Is there anything you'd like to add or say?
Oh yeah, just one last thing.
Mm.
regarding the academic thing, I don't consider art or psychology to be very suitable for academic approach to study. I think academia is absolutely amazing for studying the physical world. So, you know, you get like chemistry, engineering, physics, stuff like that. That stuff is incredible, and I am mind boggled. I mean, you know, not very often, but sometimes I can pick up like a textbook on chemistry or something. I have done that before. I think I'll read a textbook on chemistry, I'm curious. And I am blown away at the stuff that they've learned and figured out, and I'm like, wow, hat off to them, you know. But when it comes to like art and psychology, academia always tries to take the approach that everything can be broken down into mathematical formulas and verbal assessments. But reality isn't made of words and numbers. It's like even geometry itself. I was looking into geometry at one point a while ago, and there's no straight lines in nature. There's no perfect spheres. Even if you look at all the planets and the stars, they're all slightly squashed at the poles. And yeah, even light particles don't travel in straight lines because it gets bent by the gravity of stars and things like that, you know. So geometry, as amazing as it is, as a tool for mapping out the world and manipulating the world, it's not actually real. And with art and psychology, it's like academics are trying to take those things and fit them into a numbers and words model. And like I said about movies, part of the reason they're so powerful is because they get away from verbal and they get up towards the unconscious, which is mostly non-verbal. And academia has trouble with the non-verbal. And so academia rejects things like hypnosis because hypnosis deals directly with the unconscious, and we don't quite understand how or why it works, but it does work. I've seen stage hypnotism done with people who I personally knew on stage who were not actors, and they were put into serious trances. And I got involved in the hypnosis community here in Liverpool many years back, you know, in my 20s, and I learned how to do hypnotic inductions. And still to this day, academia denies hypnosis for the most part. And yet, the advertising industry and cinema and various other arts, they do use hypnosis techniques, even if they don't realise it's hypnosis. Yeah, it's getting away from the numbers and the verbal descriptions and getting towards these other aspects of ourselves that we can't measure in that way. And so academia stumbles when it reaches that. Yeah. So for that reason, art and cinema, I think, will always have an important role in the human psyche. They're like an accompaniment to academia. Oh, by the way, there's just one more thing I'll add here. You might want to include this as well. I was discussing with a friend over lunch yesterday about this, who's a fellow Kubrick obsessive, you know, and he was asking me some things about why Kubrick and his close collaborators never ever confirm anything. You ask them questions and they always dodge the questions. And I know this from having met Jan Harlan in late 2023.
How did you meet him?
Yeah, it was fun. We actually did a Q&A together on Full Metal Jacket with a live audience. It was brilliant. I was made up that he was actually willing to do that with me. So for me, that was very flattering. You know, although it was very funny when I first met him in person at the meal the night before. He turned. There was the guy who was presenting the Q&A the next night. He was sat between us, and the three of us were there to have a discussion about what we were going to talk about in the Q&A. And the guy in between us was Graham Duff, who's a well-known actor in Britain, really cool guy. And so Jan Harlan comes in, he sits down, and I thought, he knows who I am. He knows he's doing a Q&A with me tomorrow. Let's see how he greets me. I thought, I'll wait and see what he says. And he sat down next to Graham Duff, and he just sort of gestured at me, and he went to Graham, and who was this? I was like, really cool power play, you know. But yeah, I mean, in the Q&A, he actually did open up a bit about Full Metal Jacket with some things. I was surprised because I thought he was going to diss everything that I said, but he didn't. He was really good. But I'd asked him various things, and after the Q&A, I was with my girlfriend and some other people, and we were chatting to him, and I thanked him for because I said years ago I did this this video on spatial anomalies in The Shining, with the sets being all deliberately not making sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said to him, I had people having a go at me saying that wasn't the case, and then you did the Guardian interview where you confirmed that it was the case, that it was deliberately done that way. And he just sort of nodded his head, and then he went, oh yeah, the sets, yeah, they don't make sense, blah 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 blah. And then you could see he just sort of caught himself, and he was like, hang on, what am I doing? I'm acknowledging something here. And he went, but none of it was deliberate. And everyone, including him, all just burst out laughing. We all burst into laughter because we knew, and he knew, that he just admitted something that he didn't want to admit. You know. But I was saying to my friend yesterday that I think the reason why nothing is ever admitted is because if something is confirmed, there'll be a little moment of, oh yes, it's confirmed, and then it's forgotten.
And then people don't talk about it anymore. Yeah.
But by having nothing ever verbally confirmed, the fascination with those films continues forever. Yeah. And it works. Yeah. You know, I think that's a principle he abided by, and I think his collaborators realised that. Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. There we go. Interesting. Brilliant. Fab. Thank you so much, Rob. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll be in touch.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, send me the link when you're ready. Thanks, and you have a great day too.
Will do. Cheers, bye bye. Thank you.